think for a long time I downplayed this whole reality that like your living space can fuel you. No amount of money in my savings account is gonna make me feel good if I'm living in an environment where every single day I feel like shit. Welcome back to Secret Garden. Today, I am sharing exactly how I manifested my current apartment. I'm sitting in it right now, and when I first set out to say, okay, I want to manifest my next apartment, I made a list of every single thing that I wanted in an apartment. This apartment is every single thing on my list. So today I'm talking you through exactly how I got there, because I know we are currently in this time of year where everyone's either thinking about, do I want to re-sign my lease? Do I want to move to a new place? What's the vibe? It's like recalibrating, or it's like a vibe check. Do you feel really good about where you are, or do you want to move somewhere else? So if we take a step back, my first foray into apartment living was on an air mattress in my friend's apartment in Chicago, followed by me signing an apartment lease for an apartment sight unseen, only to find out that there were like pancake battered windows. Like pancake batter was smeared over every single window in the apartment. Now let me explain. It all started in a Target parking lot. I was on my lunch hour. I was sitting in this Target parking lot. I had been waiting months to speak to this particular HR representative. I was living in Indianapolis at the time, and I had gotten laid off of my first job, and the job I was in at the time, I was literally working out of someone's home, and there were about like 5 people that worked there, but everyone worked in the part of the home that was right above the garage. And there was one bathroom. I'll never forget this part. There was one bathroom, and the place was so small to where people in the office would literally keep track of when people went to the bathroom and how long they stayed in there. And from that information, they would then determine like whether or not you took a shit. That was the sort of environment that I was in. And, I felt so like constricted. I was like, I'm not meant to be here. Like, what's going on? And I just had this like gut feeling of like, I need to move. I need to move to Chicago. Like I spent a summer there. I worked there over a summer previously, and I was like feeling called to go back to Chicago. I was like, I can't handle this place. I'm so tired of working above someone's garage with eyes on me every single time I go to the bathroom. So, I would take my lunch breaks at Target. And, I had been waiting. There I was at Target. I had been waiting months for this HR person to call me back. It was for this HR person worked at a company that I interned at. It was an advertising agency. And so what I was reaching out to that HR person for was like hey, I'm ready to come work full time at this company. I'm ready to move to Chicago. Call me back and let's talk about details. That was sort of where we stood. But when I initially reached out to this HR person, she was on maternity leave. I got an out of office response. I didn't necessarily know when she was coming back. And so I had just been in this endless state of waiting. I wasn't sure when she would contact me back. So I get on the phone with her. I'm in the Target parking lot. I'm on my lunch hour. I'm like dreading going back to this office where everyone's eyes are constantly on me. Get me out of this place. Get me out of this city. I don't want to be here. So that was like purely my state of mind. I get on the phone. The HR gal says to me, "Can you be in Chicago in 2 weeks?" And in a split second, I was like, yes, I will be there. So that kicked off a period of just like a 2 week period of massive movement. I mean, I had to get all my ducks in a row. I went into that conversation, of course, hoping that there would be an opportunity, but I had no idea that the opportunity was like 2 weeks away. So I just jumped on it. I was like, I'm so fucking tired of this place that I'm in. Let me go. And, in that place, I just needed an opportunity for growth. I needed an opportunity for expansion. I was so fucking tired of sitting and working in this person's home right above their garage. That was the complete opposite of everything that I had ever dreamt of for myself. Like, how the hell did I end up here, sort of thing. So here I am in this Target parking lot. I'm like, let's fucking go. And I'm like texting my friends being like, hey, can I sleep on your couch? Or hey, can I like sleep on an air mattress in your apartment for, a month or so as I like get my feet on the ground and start this job, and then I can figure out my living environment after that. And bless my friends' souls, they said yes. And so I had somewhere to live, like within, 24, 48 hours of me saying yes. I knew where I was going to live for the first month. And from there, things just started falling into place. Now, I literally went to Chicago with, I think, one suitcase. I ended up moving into my friend's apartment, and I had an air mattress to sleep on. But the air mattress was in the middle of the living room. And which was fine. I was so grateful for the opportunity, and I was so just needing to get out of, again, working in that home environment above somebody's garage. So I was so excited to be in this big city. But, when I was in this apartment and, as I was sort of trying to get my feet wet and, figuring out the rules of the road in this new job, I would come back to an apartment where I couldn't necessarily go to bed until everyone else went to bed. And, when they would wake up, I would have to wake up because I would be woken up because I was in the main area. And so it didn't really, I didn't necessarily feel like I ever had an opportunity to recharge. And so I was going through a lot mentally on a daily basis. It was a lot of mental load to just onboard to almost like a completely new industry. I'm super green. I'm just constantly getting like downloads of information into my brain every second of the day. And there's all sorts of acronyms that everyone uses. I'm like, what the hell do these even mean? So I'm trying to learn a language, basically. I'm trying to get the rules of the road. And then when I would come home or go back to my friend's apartment at the end of the day, like I didn't feel like I could really recharge, and I didn't want to take up too much space. I didn't want, I felt a little bit weird like using their kitchen to cook things. I just didn't want to be in the way, because I was so grateful to them for even letting me stay with them. But, I did feel like I was like shrinking myself a little bit in the space in order to just like not be in anyone's way. And so, as I looked to figure out where I was going to live next, I found a roommate. It was somebody who, it was like my friend's sister. Like more steps started falling into place. Now, when I agreed to have a roommate, with that, we sort of started to delegate tasks where she was doing a lot of the apartment hunting because she had flexibility in her schedule to go view apartments. Whereas I, really had to maintain my work hours because I was so new and I was in the thick of training to where I didn't have the bandwidth to go view all these apartments. So I really almost like gave control up or gave power over to my then roommate, who all of a sudden had full control and full say over the kind of apartment that we got. And so what that ended up being is an apartment that I did not see before signing the lease. Or maybe I like saw it once, but it was a really quick review of the place. Like I didn't like truly view the place with a fine-tooth comb. And I was almost looking at it as like I have so much change happening in my life right now. I have so many things I have to focus on a daily basis that are new. And this is like the last thing that I need to be thinking about. Like I don't have the mental capacity to be thinking about the kind of space that I'm living in. And that really came to bite me in the ass, because when we moved in, I was the one who took the bedroom that had no windows in it. So it wasn't really legally a bedroom. And it was like a box of a room. I could really only fit a full-size bed in that room. And then when you would go into the main area of the apartment, there were windows, but it was essentially pancake batter is what it looked like, that was like smeared all over the windows. And the windows wouldn't open. It's like, how are these windows functional? How can you say that these are windows, functioning windows, when one, you can't see out of them, and two, you can't open them? And so, the space, how I felt in that space was, I felt like I was just in a box, and I didn't feel like I had natural light. And I'm like, I feel so closed in and boxed in and separate from the rest of the world. And I think also having a roommate made me feel that even more so, because I felt like I had to stay in my own space, and like we didn't know each other super well. And so it was this interesting dance of just like, I feel like I have to be small in my own home environment. And, over time, this window situation actually became like this big thing, because it's like, gosh, I must have gone back and forth with the landlord like so many times over email of just like, these aren't functioning windows. Like, you need to replace these windows. And, there I was really just, I was having to face the consequences of the decision that I made of handing over the power and control I had in this living space decision. And I gave it to somebody else. And I gave it to somebody who didn't have my same view when thinking about living spaces. Their priorities were different, understandably so. I mean, we all have our own priorities when thinking about living spaces. It became really difficult because, I was working in a job that was super, super stressful. And when I would want to come back and like just rest or relax, like I didn't feel like I could fully do that because there was someone else there who I wasn't like totally comfortable with. I mean, I didn't know them really. And so, when I really needed to rest, I would go into my bedroom, but then that felt like a box. It was this like continuous cycle of just like, God, I don't feel like I'm connected to the outside world, And what really started to eat me alive was just the fact that I gave my power away in this decision for the living space. I didn't stand up for myself. I didn't state my needs. I didn't advocate for myself. And, that really just like started to eat me alive. And so when it came time to look for the next apartment, when the lease was up, it was time to move on, I was like, I'm not settling. I'm not in a position to settle. And that led me to some very difficult conversations. of just essentially breaking up with my roommate and trying to do it in such a genuine way, and a way that was gentle and honest and caring, and that all backfired. But it was so important to me to just advocate for myself. And so in this next apartment that I was in, it was like this step of me fully moving towards like, I'm going to have 100% control over the decision I make. I'm going to make sure that everything about this apartment is exactly what I wanted it to be. And it ended up being that. So when I went to manifest this apartment, I had the expansion of like, okay, I've done this before. I have found an apartment that fully met everything on my list. And I've paid a hell of a lot of money in rent per month on that type of product, on that type of apartment. And it fueled my mental health so much. I mean, I was still in this deeply stressful environment. I had just found out I had food sensitivities, and I was really on this healing journey of lowering my stress levels, my cortisol levels, of getting a bunch of sleep, of I really needed control over how I exist within my daily routine. Like, I needed to go to bed early. I needed quiet time. I needed to be able to run a blender. I needed to be able to do whatever I wanted to do in my living space, whether it's like talk on the phone, catch up with a friend, not have anyone else hear the conversation. And as I stepped forward and into a space where I could do all of these things, my mental health really started to improve. And, I felt more resilient in being able to handle the stressful environment. And, it also left me room for creativity, stepping away from work and just being able to pour whatever free time I had into my imagination and the things in my mind that I wanted to create. And so, that was all really great, like self expansion for me to be like, okay, I've done this before. I did it in Chicago. Here I am in Indianapolis. I'm trying to do the same thing again, where I'm like getting an apartment that I'm so excited about. If I can do it in Chicago, I could totally do it in Indianapolis. And, when I set out to manifest this apartment in Indianapolis, I had moved back from Chicago shortly before COVID hit. Then COVID hit. I was living in my parents' house, and, I was really just like confined to my room. And I say that because, in COVID, it was like everyone was back at my parents' house plus like an additional person. So there were actually more people living in this house than any of us were ever used to because we just had an additional person. And so, it was just a lot of like, because we were all quarantining, it was almost like everyone had their own space in the house. So my space was my bedroom. I did every single thing from my bedroom. I worked out, I slept, I, hung out. Everything was done in the bedroom. And that, that was like my space. And, if I think about growing up, my bedroom growing up was like my safe haven, my safe space. My bedroom, and whether or not people could come into my bedroom, there was like a strict rule I had growing up where it's like you had to be invited into my bedroom. In order to step into my bedroom, you had to be invited. And, really, if I think about it, like that was the first instance in my life of me setting a boundary, enforcing a boundary, and having that boundary be honored. And if I take it even a step further, like growing up, like the bedroom I had in childhood was like the original like secret garden. If we think about secret garden as a place, like that was my place where my imagination just ran. I was super safe. I knew no one was going to interrupt me or distract me or come bother me. Like that was my space where I could just be. And, my childhood bedroom, like the walls were orange. I had like trophies and memorabilia and like all the awards I've ever won from like cheerleading or dance, or I had like art up all over the wall. It was like truly a representation of who I was at the time. It was a celebration of who I was at the time. And, I really tended to that space. I I remember every single weekend I would reorganize my bookshelf and I would reorganize my closet. And I used organization as a way of resetting myself and as a way of almost like organizing my mind. Because if I could organize my external reality, it also helped me sort of like organize my thoughts as well. So my walls were orange. And then once I got into high school, I was like, oh my God, I'm painting everything light purple. And I remember like just being home alone one day and my mom being like, yeah, no one can really help you because we have to work, but like here's a paint can and here's a paintbrush and go to town. And so I literally was like, yeah, I'm painting every single area of my room. Every single wall was painted and it was like my own project. And so that was totally just like my space to dream. And, it's interesting because if I really think about that room and what it represented in relation to the rest of the home, like anything outside of my bedroom was like, I wasn't quite sure what energy would come my way. And it was a little bit uncertain. And sometimes the foundation felt a little bit rocky. And I'm just like, I know I can go into my bedroom and just be at peace. And, I think I felt a similar way about that during COVID initially, or like being back at my parents' house initially. But, with it being older and me just being in a completely different stage of life, I was just like, I need to get out of here. And, I think I was realizing, I was coming to this point of like, oh my God, I've often sacrificed my living environment because I'm off focus on something else. I'm like, I care more about saving money than living in an environment that really fuels me. And I think for a long time, I downplayed this whole very real reality that like your living space can fuel you. Your living space is where you can go to rest and recharge, and it should pour back into you. And I think for the longest time, I was so disconnected from that. I didn't necessarily even realize that. I didn't, growing up, I didn't know how much my bedroom meant to me. I think in a way I did, but it wasn't so consciously at the forefront for me to then look for that in future living spaces. I just wasn't connecting the dots. I kept getting myself into these situations where I was feeling so small in the spaces that I was in. I was like, why am I'm feeling like I need to confine myself to a really small room within a larger space. Why do I feel like, why do I have this pattern of like wanting to exist in a really small corner of a big space? Why am I not taking up more space? What limiting belief is like running through my brain to where I don't believe I deserve to take up the full space within the area that I live? And so, that was the type of thing that I was really like journaling on a lot. I was doing like the to be magnetic manifestation work, the deep imaginings, reprogramming my subconscious. Like I was so focused on getting to the root of like, well, why do I feel like I just have to be small? And I think it there's also this layer of money in there of just like not wanting to spend my resources on a living environment. But, when I really took a step back and to be honest, it took me many, 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 many instances of, feeling so uncomfortable in my living environment to start to want to look for an alternative mindset. Because there got to be many different points where I was like, I cannot live like this anymore. I'm like getting anxiety attacks and I don't feel like I can control when they come. Like they're just coming. It's like energy comes in, it sideswipes me, it cuts me off at my knees, and I'm like down. I'm down for the count. And that was like energetically what was happening. And, that can only happen so many times to where it's like, I'm so fucking tired of this. And what am I doing for myself? Like, I'm not advocating for myself at all. Why am I playing so small? Why am I making myself so small in this space? Why am I hunched over? Why is my posture changing? Sort of thing. Like I've never had bad posture. And, what I would do is like journal especially during the days where I'm like, I'm feeling anxious. I just had an anxiety attack. I'm experiencing body pain. I can't sleep. I'm like, every single time I would feel these certain things, I would journal about those things and also what was happening at that same time. What was I feeling? Why was I feeling that way? Who caused that feeling? What other circumstances were happening? And, not only was it helpful for me to process that, but where it became particularly important for this is like one of the things that was so difficult for me about this whole like living space situation and where I lived and when did I want to move out and when do I get my apartment and that sort of thing. Like there were as much as there were days where I was like, I physically can't be here anymore. Like it's bad for my health, my physical and mental health and emotional health. As much as there were those days, there were also days where I was like, why would I leave? Oh my God, I'm saving so much money. Oh my God, why would I spend money on an apartment when I could just live here? And I kid you not, I was just actually right before this, I was looking back at journal entries that I had written during that time. It was jogging my memory on how like on the days when I was like, why would I leave? I would go back to the journal entries I wrote when I was feeling like absolute shit because somehow I was forgetting about the days when I felt like absolute shit. And this is so crazy to even think about. Like I've been watching Severance and I just finished season 1, episode 4. If you've never seen Severance before, it's all about how like when you're working in the corporate world, like you're severed. So who you are inside the corporate world is your innie, and then who you are outside the corporate world is your outie. And when you're in one of those worlds, you forget about the other and you kind of like lose access to yourself. And there was a point in episode 4 where Helly's innie, so that who she was in the corporate world, she desperately wanted to get out of the corporate world. And they're playing these, like the people at this company are playing mind games with her because they're showing Helly's innie a video of her outie basically like trying to gaslight her for even wanting to leave this job. It was just a situation of her gaslighting herself. But like the leaders in the corporate world were like positioning it so that she was gaslighting herself. This, I kid you not, this is like the same sort of thing that was happening with me, where it was like there was a part of me that knew that I needed to get out. But then there was this other part of me that was like, well, why would you go? We're saving so much money. And so that was like those two parts of myself were huge parts that I had to work through, of just like, we have to find a resolution here between these two parts of myself, because I know that I can't stay here. Like, this isn't doing anything for my mental health and well-being. So, it got to a point where, I was working in a new job, and I'm still at the company. And one of the things that this company does is they do a summer shutdown. So every year around July 4th, they do, everyone gets a week off. And so I was going into that week, and I said to myself, I was like, during this week, I have one job. It is to find myself an apartment. And so before that, I had written down a list of like every single thing that I had wanted in an apartment. In this next living space, I wanted to feel like a safe haven. Those were the exact words I used. I was like, this needs to feel so supportive. So the things that I wrote down on this list were, I want this apartment to come to me with ease, like the process of finding it, the process of getting it. I wanted it to be super easeful. I wanted it to feel safe and quiet and in a smoke-free building and area. I wanted the rent to be no more than $1,800 a month, ideally below $1,500 or at $1,500 a month. I wanted there to be free parking included with the building or the rent. I wanted it to be super peaceful and relaxing to my nervous system. I wanted it to be a luxury apartment. I wanted it to be full of amenities and that helped make it feel like everything was supportive and could support me. I wanted a lot of natural light, and specifically I wanted the unit to be south facing because that's when you get the most light throughout the day. I wanted to have an outdoor patio and an easy way to connect with nature. I wanted an in-unit washer dryer and dishwasher. I wanted to feel like I was fully in a position to support myself financially. So I wanted to financially separate myself from my parents. I wanted to draw the line in the sand. I wanted to say, no more. I got this. I got me. I'm just like building my own foundation. I wanted it to have a lot of space for people to come over and hang out. I wanted there to be free guest parking. I also wanted a space where I could podcast. I wanted to be able to set up a podcasting set in my living room, for example. And I also wanted, easy access to running trails. I wanted access to a pool. And I just wanted like space for out of town guests. And so that was really the list. I mean, there was a lot of stuff on the list, but I was so dedicated to just like, I've got this. I've done this same sort of thing before in Chicago. I could do it again here. And, another thing that I really wanted with this apartment was I wanted it to sort of feel like a Chicago vibe. Like the area of town, I wanted it to feel like Chicago with the walkability, with restaurants and, grocery stores nearby, workout places nearby. But I also wanted, the connectivity of living in Indianapolis because friends are here, family is here. And so, and when I set out with this list, I'm like, I have no idea where the hell I'm going to find this thing. I know it's here somewhere though. There has to be a space in Indianapolis where all of these things exist. And so I wrote this list, and all I really knew was like, I'm going to find it. I've done this before. I've done it in Chicago. I could do it here. So we get to my week off of work, and I'm like, okay, I scheduled 2 apartment tours. And, I was going back and forth on different areas within Indianapolis to look. And, when I was zeroing in on an area, I was doing a lot of research online, looking at different apartments and floor plans and amenities and that sort of thing. And I was really just going off of like a gut feeling when I was looking at apartments or thinking about what area might I want to live in. So, when I got to this week of being off, I had narrowed it down to like, okay, I feel like I know what area I want to live in. And so far, I think this area meets my criteria. And so I scheduled the 2 apartment tours. So the first one I went to, and I was like, okay, it's a central area. It has a pool, but the building's a little bit old. It's right on this like very crowded street. There's live entertainment that takes place on this street, every weekend in the summertime. And I'm just like, I remember touring this apartment, and I'm like, while it's cool that this is in the center of everything, the hallways also smell like trash, and this place is a little bit old, and I'm like, this isn't really resonating with me. There was a little bit younger of a crowd that lived there too, and I was like, this isn't really vibing with me. Like, I was looking for people who are like in their 30s or like just turned 30. And so I was like, yeah, this place doesn't feel quite right. So I think it was the next day I went to the next place. And so I get there, it's still in the central part of the area that I was looking at. And, everything's sort of checking the box. It has a pool, the units are nice, the building's new, it feels luxurious. And, when I was on the tour and I went to the pool area, I ended up like tripping on the pool deck. There was some sort of uneven area. It was like part of the pool deck was a ramp and then part of it was not. And like somehow I tripped and my foot just started hurting so bad mid-tour. And so, as I finished the tour and as I was walking out of that tour thinking like, could I really see myself living here? All I was feeling was pain in my foot. And I was just like, okay, well, there's no way that could be a good sign. Like, this has to be a bad sign. So I was like, okay. I went home. I'm like, I'm going back to the drawing board. I haven't arrived at my manifestation yet, but there has to be another spot. So I went on Google Maps and I'm like, okay, what buildings have I not looked at yet? So I'm like scanning this area that I ultimately want to live in. And I see this one building that I had not yet looked at. And, I go online and I'm like, it's above my price range. And I'm just like, it's expensive, but everything else is checking the box. It seems like it checks the box of everything I want. And so I'm like, let me just go look. Let me just schedule a tour and see what I think. So I schedule a tour for like later on that week or maybe the next day or something. And I go on the tour and I immediately get this feeling of, oh my God, this is everything on my list. Every single amenity. It was just the feeling I got here where I was like, oh, this is a place where I can like where I can rise. It's like a place of healing, a place of feeling really held up. It truly felt like a safe haven. There's so many different amenities here. There's a pool, there's like courtyards, there's easy access to nature, there's, you know, like every single thing just felt right. And, I was feeling super good. Also, like, the leasing agent was such a sweet lady. I'm like, okay, the vibes are incredible. So I go back. I remember leaving the tour and just thinking, like, wow, that's my manifestation. But, I still had this thing in my mind of like, this is outside of the budget that I set for myself. So, over the next few days, I was sort of doing this mental gymnastics and running the numbers of like, well, why did I set the budget at the price I did? Because, I was in learning more about this building. It was like their rule of thumb is like you have to make 3 times more per month than the cost of your rent. And I fit that, which is wild to me because, like, it was sort of the same rent price as I was paying in Chicago only like 4 years prior. And when I was in Chicago, like the last apartment I had in Chicago, I remember I was making $48,000 a year and I was paying like $2,000 a month in rent. Like I was pouring money into my apartment. And, I was also, I wasn't going into debt or anything. Let that be known. I was able to afford it, but not I was not making 3 times the cost of the monthly rent payments. But that was a very focused year of me doing that and me focusing on like prioritizing my health and my well-being. And so for me, that investment was really important at that time. And so when I thought about this new apartment and when I saw the fact that like, oh my God, I meet this rule, the Chicago apartments do not have that rule. I mean, shoot, like so many people would not be able to afford their apartments. Or so many people like wouldn't get accepted for their apartments if that was a rule. But, I think the fact that with this apartment in the Indianapolis area, like I felt like I felt like I could do it financially because I fit within the rule that the leasing company had set. And so, over the course of the next few days, I was sort of mapping out my monthly budget. Like, how much money would I have left over if I paid for this? And, what other things? I was just trying to get a full financial picture. And that, through running those numbers, it helped build a confidence within myself and help me see to believe that, oh, I can afford this and I can save money while I'm here. I can afford all of my expenses. I can go and do cool things. I could go travel. Like, I would also have disposable income. And so, that was super expansive for me to just see for myself written on paper. And so, I just felt this incredible sense of like, this is an investment in myself that I need to make. And when I visualize myself living here, I'm like, this is the place where I'm going to up level into the next version of myself. And that's so wild for me to even say, just like sitting here, I'm in my second year of living here. And this truly has been a place of just like, I just feel like whenever I leave this place, I don't know when I'm going to move out, but like, I truly feel like I'm going to leave this place a completely different person and a new person, and for all the most amazing reasons. And I'm so grateful to this place. And I remember moving in here and it almost took me like a few weeks to even adjust to the fact that like, Oh my God, I have a 1 bedroom apartment. Oh my God, I can work in my living environment and have it be outside of my bedroom. There's so many different things that feel so supportive, and I feel like I can expand and be myself and express myself and take up space. I think the biggest thing that I had to come to terms with for myself was just I can no longer be small in my living space. My living space needs to reflect back to me, mirror back to me the fact that I can play big. I don't have to be small. I don't have to be confined to one air mattress, 1 bedroom. I can have my space to exist within my daily routine, exist to just rest, exist and just be. That was so incredibly important. And I also had to get super comfortable and step through this whole I need to save money and settle on my living environment. And what I ultimately came to with that was no amount of money in my savings account is going to make me feel good if I'm living in an environment where every single day I feel like shit. And so, it was this massive step forward in investing in myself, investing in my living space, knowing that investment is going to have a massive return. That investment is going to lay the foundation for me to up level into the next version of myself. So why not step forward, maybe pay a little bit more per month? I know I can afford it, so that I can exist and be a part of this space that feels like every single thing that I want. And every single day I live here, and I'm reminded of the fact that I can have every single thing that I want. And so, if you're listening to this and you're like, God, I really just want to find a better living space. I'm not happy where I'm at. I need to find something better. I just hope that me sharing this story helps you kind of identify and understand within your own patterning of life, where have you settled in your living spaces in the past, and how might you be able to step through that? How can you take the opposite approach of what you might have taken in the past? Or how can you look for the opposite of what you've perhaps lived in the past, and know within yourself that you're deserving of that? You can absolutely have everything that you want, and it's only going to push you to that next level. So I hope that this inspires you. If you're listening to this and you're thinking oh my God, I just thought of a bunch of other things that I want to have in my next apartment, or if you have an ongoing list of what you want in your next living space, comment that below. I would love, love, love to hear what you're looking for in your next space. I am always thinking of what might I want in my next space? So I would absolutely love to hear that. Also, if you've really enjoyed this episode, or maybe you've been around for a few episodes now and are enjoying the content, I invite you to give a 5-star review of the show, follow the show, subscribe to the show. All of these types of things really help with the discoverability of the show. And also, when people do discover Secret Garden and they're checking it out, it helps give them a sense of what it's like in Secret Garden. So I would be so appreciative if, you give feedback and hit the follow button. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful for you to be on this journey with me.